Well, I was just thinking about something, and what I was thinking about is that many coming of age stories don't really feel like they are your story. They almost feel like they are marketed to be someone else's story. And what I mean by this is that coming of age stories, whether in film or books or TV shows even, are primarily marketed towards a particular demographic to fit with a specific cultural trend. For example, Euphoria, which stars Zendaya and many other actors in it, is a show that is on Max, of course. If you've seen Euphoria, you know what I'm talking about. I've seen like some of it, but not all of it. But Euphoria is a show that's about a girl going through tumultuous events in her life. You know, social issues, psychological problems, drug addiction, greater geopolitical or social political tensions going on in her immediate vicinity. And while I think that's great that coming of age stories touch on those topics, they feel like they're generated by a studio, by a production company that is looking to market specific stories for specific audiences. And the thing that they do is that they market it as universal. Oh, they are universal stories. They appeal to broad audiences. They are meant to reflect everyone's coming of age journey, right? But the problem with this is that the story is very specific to the point where it contradicts most people's lived realities. Another example of this I can think of would be The Perks of Being a Wallflower, the 2012 movie that's based on Stephen Chbosky's, is that how you say his last name? I don't remember his last name. Stephen Chbosky's book, which was released back in like the late 90s. It's a book that is about his life experiences as a high schooler, and the topics that he explores are mental health, rape, I shouldn't say that word, but I said it already. Abuse, that's another word. Sexuality and things like that. The original book is much darker and more serious than the movie was. The movie is a very sanitized and very curated image, a very curated version of what the book was, by denouncing those themes and focusing on the personal growth of the character of Charlie, played by Logan Lerman in the movie. But the problem with the movie, and I've noticed this as I've gotten older, is that the movie is very like muddled. It's a very mediocre, very slow paced, very boring, and very sanitized version of the book. And the movie's presented as something that, oh, it's universal, right? Oh, it's everyone's coming of age story. But in reality, it's a very specific coming of age lens that doesn't reflect everyone's lived experiences. If you're someone who's working class, or someone who is living in poverty, or someone who has to fight, you know, financial burdens, or a chronic illness, or is going through shit right now in life, and how exactly you're going to relate to the whole coming of age personal growth journey that you see in a movie like The Perks of Being a Wallflower? How exactly are you going to relate to that? That's not relatable. That's just feels dishonest, right? It almost feels like that story was made for someone else in mind. It was not made for you. And I noticed this, especially as someone who comes from a different cultural background, who notices these things. But I feel like it's up to the viewer to decide on what it really counts for them, right? That when you read a coming of age story, you always get the sense that it is someone else's story, but this can also be your story too, right? Because your coming of age will look different from someone else's coming of age. And what bothers me about this is that the movie does not call itself out, right? The movie claims to be universal, or at least subconsciously thinks it is, but it's clearly about something else. It's clearly about the specific journey in mind that does not reflect your life experience. It reflects someone else's life experience. Other films I can think about this are Juno, or Superbad, or Lady Bird, which are all coming of age movies. All of them have this sort of quirky indie style comedy drama, and yet all of them feel very disconnected from reality, because reality is not a quirky comedy drama. Reality is very messy. Reality is very uneven. It's very, unpredictable, very uncertain. People in this age of life typically try to question everything that was handed to them. Even if they were born in a more relatively privileged background, they try to ask themselves, where do I fit in all this? What is my purpose in life? How do I discover, they have that privilege of asking themselves, who am I? But if you are someone who is not of that background, you're trying to figure out, how do I survive in all this? How do I survive these systems that are pressuring me to such a degree that it's such a headache, right? Having to deal with financial limitations, having to deal with medical, insurance, having to deal with with getting a job, having to deal with living with parents who don't really, fit with my the way I see things. It's very frustrating, and when you try to map that into a movie, it doesn't map out at all. Now, I don't think the movie is trying to make a point that everyone's background should look like that. The movie, especially like movies like Lady Bird, for example, it doesn't say you have to be of that background for you to like the movie. You don't have to be. You don't have to be a girl to like that movie. You don't have to go through the experiences she went through in order to understand or even like the movie. Hell, even the people that like the movie don't say things like, oh, I like this movie because it literally reflects my life. That's not what people are saying. What people are saying when they like the movie is that it reflects something interior about their life. And that's the point, is that personal growth stories are really about trying to figure out what humans can do when they're trying to discover themselves. Self-discovery, right? But it kind of assumes you have the money, you have the time, you have the structural advantages, you have the things that allows you to do these things. But if you don't have these things, how are these stories relatable? These stories feel very disingenuous, disconnected, and dishonest, right? And another thing too to remember is that stories like Juno or The Perks of Being a Wallflower or Lady Bird or Superbad or even what's another one that I'm trying to think about? Even 8th Grade, the 2018 movie that was what was the actor's name? I forgot. Ellie Fisher, was that her name? I don't remember. But even stories like that, they feel like disconnected from reality, because real life does not look like a coming of age journey. Real life is ugly. Real life is is much more like difficult for a lot of people. And that's why I don't find these stories very compelling, because they don't match my interior journey. They don't match how I went through when I was growing up. Because growing up was not going to prom or finding a girl to go out with or discovering myself or what else? Having the time to really engage with people on a level that really encouraged me to just enjoy the life, right? Enjoy the high school life, the social life, and all that stuff. I didn't have that life experience, so it makes me wonder, who are these films made for? If that's what I'm reading into, and if that's true. I don't think you need a conspiracy theory lens to understand that coming of age movies are driven by marketing incentives. They're driven by studios who are looking to make their films as marketable as possible, and to appeal to a broader demographic, or at least a broader audience, for them to make money. They do have to take minimal risks, because if they try to make a story, everybody's looking at me. If they try to make a story about a kid struggling, or a teenager admitting that they have an existential crisis, or that they have a medical condition that they're dealing with, or that they're admitting that, yeah, I'm from a privileged background and yet I'm still struggling like everybody else is, the movies become less marketable, right? They become less appealing to a wider demographic. And that's very hard to do in storytelling, because how can you make a story about genuine struggle and still make it accessible? I mean, there's plenty of stories that are like that, but they're typically found outside of coming of age genre. Coming of age movies often assume that, oh, you have that structural incentive, you have that personal growth mindset, and they have that sort of life is good, right? Life is real good, right? That mindset is something that I don't really agree with, because my life experience doesn't look like that. And I wanted to bring up a different genre, or a different set of genre films that I feel match that, even though I don't have those literal experiences myself. You can look at the dystopian fiction rather, where these stories, these works of fiction within dystopia, they reflect reality much better, because they actually showcase things like structural inequality, authoritarianism, a very messy, very morally gray reality, or an apocalyptic sense of urgency that shows people are trying to survive systems that they can't control. And there's so many examples I can name from the dystopian genre, and a lot of them I do like. Dystopian genre is a genre of fiction that I love. I love films like Blade Runner, or Children of Men, or The Matrix, or 1984, and I have the book also by George Orwell. It's a great book. Everyone should read it. What else? The Hunger Games. Yeah, The Hunger Games is great. I really like The Hunger Games. What else? Snowpiercer. Snowpiercer is an incredible movie. Bong Joon-ho's second best movie, behind Parasite. What's another dystopian piece of fiction? 28 Days Later, maybe, but that's more of a zombie movie, not quite dystopian. The sequels, I would say, yeah, they get more dystopian, but the first one's more of a zombie apocalypse film. But yeah, even post-apocalyptic stories, they fit with that genre too. Oh, Clockwork Orange, that's another dystopian piece of fiction that I really like. It's like dystopian satire. I got the book also. But the point I'm trying to get is that dystopian stories feel more authentic to me because they do acknowledge that life sucks, right? That society can be very oppressive. Society can really crumble into something that is controlling, that is totalitarian, totalitarian, you know what I mean? Very much controlled by people who don't have the interest of the people, right? Oh, V for Vendetta, that's another one. V for Vendetta is another great piece of dystopian fiction. And yeah, that movie is very relevant politically, speaking about it. Plan to watch the movie this November the 5th, because the movie is now hitting its 20th anniversary. It makes me want to revisit the film and really check out the movie with a slightly different lens, knowing that the movie has a lot of political allegories in there that I really liked, even though I don't agree with it fully. I know people have used V for Vendetta for their political views and all that stuff. You know, movies and stories have a long history of being used by people in protesting, you know, in times of crisis where they feel the weight of structural inequality, but they just don't have the words of saying it, and the movie provides that words for it. So you get what I'm saying, right? Is that dystopian fiction just feels more authentic, but don't mistake what I've said for, oh, so dystopian is more true than coming of age. They both can be true. Coming of age stories can resonate with people from a particular background, but the mistake they make, and the mistake that marketing companies make when they're advertising the movie and promoting it to a wider audience, is assuming that life experience is for everybody, or applies to everybody, or should be for everybody, when that's largely not true. Not everybody comes from a background like that. Not everybody went through prom. Not everybody had a girlfriend or a boyfriend. Not everybody had the time to experience the leisure of life in high school or even college, because that's not how life really is for most of the time, even especially for people that are of lower classes or even people that are of upper classes, because personal growth stories really are about protecting the needs of the people that are experiencing it, but never taking into account that real struggle exists too, and that internally there is a lot of things going on in people's lives that you never see. You never see their struggles. You never see what chronic illnesses they're dealing with, what psychological disorders they might have, what structural inequalities or structural advantages they benefit from. These stories avoid that sort of self-reflection, knowing that it is about protecting the system that it is narrativizing, because that's fundamentally, on some level, what it's trying to do. Now, you can say the same thing about almost every other story, right? Oh, they're doing it to protect, you know, power structures, or to promote, or to serve certain interests. Every story kind of has that, but some are just more subtle about it, and others are more explicit about it, and some don't try to do that at all. Some are just trying to tell a story. But it helps to connect art and storytelling with real life, you know, real life systems like economics, politics, what else? Culture, language, and what else? And media itself. That shows these stories are not just concerned about, oh, what does coming of age look like to a person here? They're about serving a deeper incentive about who gets to have that version of coming of age. And that's something that I feel needs to be called out, because this will encourage artists and filmmakers to make coming of age stories that reflect other perspectives. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that greater shift in media where coming of age is no longer just about, oh, high school or prom or finding your first crush. It is about confronting the fact that there's no guarantees when you grow up, right? There's no guarantee that you're going to find your first crush, or that you will make it past high school, or that you'll grow up cleanly. You know, real life is very rough when it comes to that, and people are experiencing that now because of how unstable and how messed up things are right now, especially when we know that these stories were written by people from that background that gave them the accessibility to write that story, but that story does not feel authentic to a lot of us. It doesn't feel authentic to me because I didn't have that life background. I didn't have that life experience. So I can't say that I like the movie. And if I do, it just feels like I'm lying to myself, and I don't want to lie to myself on that. That's why I feel the need to call it out. I feel the need to criticize it, and criticize it as much as I can, so that way the studios can listen to people like me who demands better. You know, we want coming of age stories like The Florida Project, which shows a family stuck in poverty while living next to Disneyland. Stories like that are great because they show us that, oh man, people are struggling. People out there do need help. And the story reflects that incredibly well. And the vision behind these stories are great too. Moonlight is another one too. Moonlight by Barron Jenkins, that's another great movie. And even though I'm not of that background, even though I'm not an African-American person who has a queer identity, but that movie is proof that, oh wow, you can tell a story from another point of view that really clicks with people, that really shows that yes, this story is amazing. Even though I'm not from that background, I greatly respect this story, and it's nice to see people, you know, who are of a queer background, queer sexuality, people who are of a different ethnicity, people who live in a different cultural or systemic background. Nice to see their stories represented. Nice to see that coming of age stories can be serious. They can be serious critiques about people growing up in very harsh environments. Another one is Roma. Roma isn't really coming of age, but it's got coming of age elements. That's the Alfonso Cuarón movie, released back in 2018 on Netflix. It's Mexican. It's a Mexican movie that is about a housemaid who gets stuck in a series of events where she gets exploited by economic systems. She gets entangled in political unrest, and she experiences a very tragic and very serious loss that gets people around her, especially children who get around her. And you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. The end scene of the movie where they're at the beach and she's surrounded by all the kids who simply hug her. That was a great moment that shows this is what real life looks like for a lot of us. For a lot of us that don't come from a background that encouraged people to, or that made people experience life easily. People here had it tough. They had it rough because they did not come from a background that enabled them to go to prom or go to high school or meet their first crush. They had to confront life as it really was while still living in the social systems and the social structures that we rely on. And especially within that context of 1970s Mexico, when it was going through, you know, the political unrest. And that's something that the director of that movie, Alfonso Cuarón, who was behind Children of Men, also based the movie on. He based the movie off of his own life experiences. And I like that too. And I like that on both sides, where a director or filmmakers make a movie that's based off of their life experiences. And that's something I want to do too. I want to make movies based on my own life experiences. But for my take, I want to be more confrontational with it. I want to confront deeper realities and deeper issues that are going on in society that shows we are participating in this too. That we're not going to just passively receive a movie and think, oh, that's the greatest movie I've ever seen. No, we're gonna go out there, make the films that we want to make, and critique the social systems, the structures, and whatever else that is beyond our reach, right? Beyond our control. Because this allows us to turn struggle into art. And that's what art at some level is. It turns struggle into something meaningful for people to process. For, you know, it's a cathartic release of expressing what they cannot say in words or what cannot be spoken out loud, because art communicates that feeling. Art isn't perfect, of course, and art can absolutely be driven by political incentives, you know, by political or ideological purposes, but that's fine too, because art still allows for that. If you have a political or ideological background and you still want to express your art, you can still do that. Just don't expect everybody to agree with you, because I certainly will not agree with you. But my issue is that coming of age stories are presented as something that's universal, something that's relatable, and yet I don't find it relatable at all. And I see how sinister it feels. It feels sinister because it's like it's marketing at you, but it's not for you. You know what I mean? That the story at the end of the day was never made for you, and yet the algorithm is still pushing it for you. And people in your school sometimes occasionally bring it up, but it's not something that you're obligated to watch, because it's not something that reflects your background. It's not something that reflects your life story. If anything, you should have the power in you to write your own life story, for you to say that, you know what, I'm not going to be entangled in other people's BS or in a version of coming of age that does not match my background. Not something like Juno, which is a quirky coming of age movie that has teen pregnancy and yet treats teen pregnancy as a quirky joke, and that's not how I see it. or something like Perks being a wallflower, which feels manipulative. Emotionally, it just feels like it feels manipulative, and it feels fake. It feels artificial. Or even something like Lady Bird, which was by the director of Barbie. Even though I like Barbie, Greta Gerwig, yeah, she made Lady Bird, and to be fair, she wrote that story based on her life experience. To be fair, and that movie was trying to be at least a little bit more honest, because that movie shows the struggle between Lady Bird and her mother, the dynamic between the two. I think that's something that the movie gets incredibly correctly. I can appreciate that, but the movie still feels like a constructed take on a coming of age journey that isn't going to be for everybody. You know what I mean? And I think as time goes on, filmmakers are more open about that. They're saying, yeah, my story's not for everybody, but I still wrote the story anyways because I felt like writing this and expressing this anyways. And that's where it feels like we're heading, where stories are becoming more specific, more aimed at particular audiences, but you can still like it. You know, you still have the freedom to like the movie. And in this case, I have the freedom to say I did not like Lady Bird. I thought the movie Lady Bird was mediocre and was very much, you know, it was a very boring and very uncompelling coming of age journey that I couldn't connect with. I couldn't connect with the character of Lady Bird because she's not a character that I can put myself in my shoes in. Even though I am not a guy, I'm not a person that hates female films, female-led films, or female perspective films. I don't hate that. If anything, it's great that a movie made by a female director is able to make a movie from a female lens that is authentic. You know, I can appreciate that, but I'm talking mainly about the journey of the character, not her gender. That's not something I wanted to say because it really bothers me, and I just don't know how to put it into words exactly either, because coming of age stories, at some point, yeah, you connected with them when they were younger, but as you get older, you realize, oh, wait a minute, they're about something else. They are about these deeper things. And even though the films never say it out loud, but you can tell under the surface that the devil's in the details, that these stories may not be for you. They may not be reflecting your life. They are reflecting someone else's life. And they still try to market themselves as universal, even though they're told through a very specific slice of life experience that isn't for everybody. It's not going to be for everyone's lived experiences, and that's fine. I mean, I don't see anything about that that's conspiratorial or sinister, but it feels that way. It feels that way because it's almost like media in this case is distorting what people think growing up looks like. And growing up isn't just about finding your first crush, or exercising personal growth, or trying to discover who you are. Coming of age is about integrating more with the world, understanding how this world works, understanding yourself in all of this, and really coming to terms with the fact that you were born into a set of circumstances that you did not choose. You didn't choose your class, you didn't choose your background, you didn't choose your ethnicity, you didn't choose your nationality, you didn't choose your parents, you didn't choose the systemic accessibility or inaccessibility, but you still can navigate it. And that's a more honest coming of age story that I think is waiting to be told, and we are seeing glimpses of it. We are seeing a shift in this that shows that coming of age story is now being more accepted, whether in films like The Florida Project, or Moonlight, or The Worst Person in the World, or Roma, or what else, or even in earlier works like A Girl Interrupted, or Trainspotting, or what else? What's another one? Or Good Will Hunting, or Boyhood, that's a recent one, or even Stand By Me. These are all coming of age stories that I think are great because they're first and foremost, they're dramas. You know, they're not really comedies, they're dramas that confront the reality of what it means to grow up in various different circumstances. And these are films I can all greatly respect. These are truly great films that I really like. And second of all, it encourages you to look at your own life and actually wonder, you know what, I've had experiences like that are similar. The struggle, you know, the sacrifices I've made, the disadvantages I had when growing up, you know, when I was dealt with financial constraints, when I was dealt with medical conditions, you know, chronic illness, when I felt like the outsider in all this, I felt like this world didn't really belong to me, and yet I still have to live inside of it anyways. It's that kind of story that I think is incredible. You know, that kind of story is the true coming of age that I think we are now getting to see fully. Oh, The Breakfast Club. That's another movie that I really liked also. That's a great movie.